Alright guys, let's go ahead and talk about these heel elevated narrow stance air squats that we're going to see a lot in this next cycle. The primary reason that we're throwing this in is so that we can almost isolate the knee joint and get it prepped and ready, warmed up, feeling good with larger ranges of motion that then hopefully allow for deeper ranges of motion or larger ranges of motion when we get into loaded versions of our squat. So when we think about a narrow stance, we're automatically thinking it's going to be a little bit more quad dominant, right? My definition of this would be hip width or closer. So if they're out here, it might feel super narrow for them, but I would say let's try to encourage them to actually move a little bit tighter still, right? Now, some big humans might need to go out here, and that's fine. If their normal squat is like a sumo position, you know, this is a relatively narrow stance, and it kind of checks the box. But the big thing that we're looking for, and I'll do a couple facing you, and then I'll do a couple from profile, is that when we set this up, because we've got those heels elevated, we're taking the ankle mobility almost out of the picture, and then emphasizing sitting straight down to make this more of a knee-centric, quad-centric movement to drive right back up. Now, this is a little harder to see from the front, but this is more or less showing you the stance width. You can see my knees flare out a little bit, but they're more or less pushing towards the camera. Now, from the profile, this is where it's going to really make sense. So, same stance, right? Same width. As I perform this movement, I'm going to think about sitting straight down. So I'm not sitting back. I'm thinking about trying to stay nice and tall in the torso, sitting straight down, almost putting emphasis on butt cheeks to heels, so I get that full depth, full range of motion for what my joints will allow for, right? Now, one of the common faults is going to be, oh, okay, we're squatting, I got to sit back first, and then they do this thing, and then if you notice, look at my shin angle, right? It's pretty much straight up and down. So no longer is this movement about my knees, this is actually becoming more of a hinge and probably starting to aggravate my low back a little bit. Right? So with this heel elevated squat, we're really focusing on making the knees do a little bit of extra work and the quads a little bit of extra work, both preparatory and just general demand, so that we can kind of beef up those tissues and hopefully avoid any sort of like knee tendonitis, patellar tendonitis, any of that stuff that comes along with high rep squats, single leg movements that we have coming up in our new cycle. So really important that we get these heel elevated squats performed correctly with focus and control. Obviously, some of our athletes, and maybe some of you out there, are going to have a little bit more trouble with this movement than others, in which case, slow down, cut the reps down, work your way into it, but the keys of this thing are the same. Heels are elevated to take the ankle mobility out of the picture, and we're sitting straight down to make it more of a quad/knee-centric movement. All right? That'll be our heel elevated air squat.